Prescribing controlled substances via telemedicine, is it allowed now during the public health emergency? And significantly, what will happen once the public health emergency ends here in 2023? The federal one is going to end soon. A lot of states have already set their termination dates for states of emergency for a public health emergency. So let's talk about controlled substances and telemedicine and how that will work at the end of this year, if not sooner. So this is spurred on by a letter written by the American Hospital Association on behalf of its more than 5,000 member hospitals and health systems. They wrote a letter to the DEA to take action to actually implement a rule that was supposed to be put into place almost 14 years ago. So a little history is in order here, but I promise it'll be brief. In 2008, the Ryan-Haidt Act sought to prevent the prescription of opioids over the internet via online questionnaire. Now, they did carve out some safe harbors for legitimate professionals who are trying to practice in a way that will benefit patient care. At that time, in 2008, the law urged the DEA, and in fact required the DEA to come up with a special telemedicine registration process, the rules for which and the application for which were supposed to be done by April 2009. DEA did not act. And then in 2018, after about a decade of waiting from the industry, it still hadn't acted. So prior to the pandemic of 2020, the DEA still hadn't acted. But in 2018, Congress and the president signed a law that said, DEA, you shall issue the application instructions and come up with the final rule for the process to obtain what was the safe harbor called Special Telemedicine Registration under the Ryan-Haidt Act of 2008, so a decade earlier. But 1 year came and went and DEA still hadn't acted, and this is now 2019. So as you may well know, at the beginning of 2020, we had a public health emergency issued, and it, among other things, waived the in-person requirement before you can prescribe controlled substances, assuming you're acting in the ordinary course of your business and all of those other assumptions safely that you're doing the right thing. You're a good actor and not a bad egg, right? But there was a letter in March of 2022, I actually referenced it in my book, The Practice of Telemedicine, amongst maybe 100 or maybe over 100 stakeholders in the healthcare industry, urging the DEA to come out with a solution for this telemedicine only, because they knew that the public health emergency would not go on forever. Similarly, there was another letter by a bunch of industry stakeholders in the fall. I signed on to that one on behalf of Functional Lawyer and on behalf of all of you guys, urging the DEA to come out with this special telemedicine registration, which is now 13 years past due. Now in 2023, we're going on 14 years past due. And this most recent letter from December and the American Hospital Association is vehemently urging, I guess is the best way to say it, or vehemently asking the DEA to kind of do what it said it would do, or what it's required to do under both the Ryan-Haidt Act of 2008 and the Support Act of 2018. Still nothing, no response so far. So here's what we know, and here's what we'll look forward to as we move into 2023. Right now, under the PHE, they have waived the in-person requirement prior to prescribing controlled substances, including testosterone. What that means is, when the PHE expires or ends, the default rule will go back into place. The default rule is, prior to prescribing a controlled substances, the prescriber has to see the patient in person for an evaluation before the prescriber can issue that prescription. Now, I paused and emphasized on prescriber because there have been some questions in the past about, can their PCP do an in-person evaluation and then me as a telemedicine provider then issue the prescription? It's very clear under the rule that that is not allowed. The prescriber is the one that needs to be the one that conducts the in-person examination. So unless the DEA acts, that rule will fall back into place by the end of the year or whenever the PHE ends. So hopefully DEA will, with the urging of the American Hospital Association and many, many other industry stakeholders, take some action, because as they laid out in this most recent letter, there may be a gap in coverage here where patients who, whether it's mental health or whether it's hormonal health or anything in between, are relying on telemedicine to, stay on their course of treatment, which includes controlled substances in this case. So if nothing happens, the DEA declines to act, then there may be a gap there, and then the patient will have to scramble, or there may be some abandonment issues. So we're trying to make sure that providers don't get caught in that, and that patient care ultimately comes first. There, again, there is a safe harbor that's been carved out 13 years ago, 14 years ago now, but the rules for that have never been put into place. So we're just under the can't prescribe unless you see somebody in person once the public health emergency ends. So keep following me at Functional Lawyer. I'll continue to monitor the situation and let you know when I hear anything from the DEA, if ever, or what are the best practices to do once the PHE expires if the DEA does nothing. So I'm Scott Radigan. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Hit subscribe, share it with a friend, help me out, and we'll see you guys in the next video.